A night that changed everything. His name was Richard. He was 63. Tall, quiet, and the kind of man who looked like he'd never complain unless he absolutely had to. When he came into my clinic, he didn't start with a question. He started with a story. "I had sex with my wife last Friday," he said. "She was happy. I thought I was fine too, until I wasn't." I raised my eyebrows. "What happened?" "I woke up around 3 a.m. Heart pounding, sweating. I felt like I'd just run a race, but I hadn't moved in hours." He paused. Then he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Doc, I didn't know one night could make me afraid to touch my wife ever again." It wasn't a heart attack, thankfully, but it was a warning. And not just for Richard, but for every man over 60 who's ever asked himself, how often should I be doing this? You see, that one night changed everything for Richard. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was emotional too. He told me, "I've always thought more meant better, but now I'm not so sure." That moment, his fear, his honesty, is why I'm making this video. Because this question, how often should a man over 60 have sex? It's more common than you'd think. And the answer? It's not what most people expect. There's no magic number. No one size fits all. But there are signs, limits, and smarter ways to stay intimate without risking your health. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the science, the real stories, and what I've learned from decades as a urologist. We'll talk about how much is too much, what your body is trying to tell you, and why intimacy after 60 is more about connection than performance. And if any part of you has ever wondered, am I still doing this right? Then this video is for you. If you find this topic valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. You might not need it today, but someone you love might need it tomorrow. The big myth, the more the better, is a lie. Let me be blunt. There's this idea that refuses to die, that the more sex a man has, the more manly he is. More equals better. More means you've still got it. More makes you strong, desirable, alive. But here's the truth, and it might surprise you. That belief has caused more harm than good, especially after 60. I can't tell you how many men I've seen in my clinic, men who were strong, healthy, intelligent, but who pushed themselves too hard trying to meet some imaginary standard of sexual performance. They weren't chasing connection. They were chasing proof. Proof they were still men, still powerful, still valid. And in doing so, they ran themselves into exhaustion. They burned out. Some damaged their confidence. Some even damaged their health. Sex isn't a race anymore. It's a rhythm you learn to move with as your body changes. Here's what you need to understand. After 60, your body doesn't recover the way it used to. Your testosterone, the hormone responsible for libido, energy, and performance, drops steadily after your mid-40s. By 60, it's not unusual for a man to have 30% less testosterone than he did in his 30s. And while that doesn't make you broken, it does mean you need to adapt. Recovery time is longer. Refractory periods, how long it takes before you can perform again, get extended. And pushing too hard too often can lead to more harm than good. Harvard Health Publishing and Mayo Clinic have both said the same thing. There is no ideal number of times a man should have sex per week. There is only what works for your body, your mind, and your relationship. Some men do just fine with twice a week. Some thrive on once a month. Some don't need intercourse at all to feel close. The problem isn't frequency. It's the expectation. The shame we attach to needing less. The pressure to perform like we're still 25. Let me share something personal. Years ago, I treated a man named Joseph. He was 66, in decent shape, and married for 40 years. But he came to me nearly in tears. Not because something was wrong, but because he felt broken. His wife was content with their level of intimacy. But Joseph had read some article online that said real men over 60 still have sex 3 times a week. So he tried. He forced it. He faked excitement. He ended up with anxiety, fatigue, and trouble sleeping. It took months to unwind that belief. But when he finally let go of the number and focused on connection, his intimacy returned. His confidence returned. And most importantly, his health stabilized. More is not always better. Smarter is always better. I often tell men, stop counting. Start listening. Ask yourself, do I feel good after intimacy? Do I feel close to my partner? Or do I feel drained, pressured, disconnected? Because those answers tell me far more about your health than any frequency ever could. There's another story I still think about. Mark, 61, had recently retired. He came in feeling anxious, like his worth as a husband was slipping. He said, "My wife still works. I'm home. I feel like if I'm not giving her what she wants in bed, she might look elsewhere." That fear drove him to overperform, to say yes when his body was saying no. He ended up with elevated blood pressure, disrupted sleep, and tension in the very relationship he was trying to protect. When we worked through it, he admitted, "I wasn't doing it for us. I was doing it out of fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being enough." That fear is real, and it affects more men than we talk about. But pushing through fear with performance doesn't build connection. It builds resentment, both with your body and your partner. We live in a culture that glorifies youth and speed. But growing older is not a loss. It's an invitation to slow down, to deepen, to feel more, even if you do less. And in that slowing down, you may discover something no 25-year-old ever will. That real satisfaction doesn't come from how often you do it, but how fully you're present when you do. So forget the magazine stats. Forget the locker room bravado. Forget the illusion that more equals better. It doesn't. It never did. It just fooled us into thinking we had something to prove. What you have now, if you take care of it, can be richer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything from your past. And all it takes is the courage to rewrite the rules on your own terms. That's the new definition of manhood after 60. It has nothing to do with numbers, and everything to do with wisdom, and the willingness to honor your body, not compete with it. Signs you're pushing too hard. Let's get real. Most men don't realize they're overdoing it until their body forces them to stop. And by the time that happens, the damage may already be done. So how do you know when you've crossed the line from healthy intimacy into physical overload? Here are the signs I see most often in my clinic. Sign number 1, a racing heart that won't calm down. It's normal for your heart rate to rise during sex. But if you're still feeling your chest pounding 30 minutes later, that's not passion. That's strain. Your cardiovascular system is telling you something's off. Sign number 2, trouble sleeping after sex. Yes, sex often helps people sleep better. But if you find yourself restless, agitated, or wide awake at 2 a.m., your nervous system may have been overstimulated. That's a red flag. It means your body isn't entering recovery mode. Sign number 3, temporary erectile dysfunction. This one surprises a lot of men. They'll say, "I was fine last night, but now I can't get it up." It's not always psychological. Sometimes it's just your body saying, "I'm not ready yet." You pushed too hard. You didn't rest enough. And now your system is offline. Sign number 4, feeling more anxious than relaxed. Sex is supposed to leave you feeling close, calm, and satisfied. But if you finish and feel nervous, drained, or unsettled, that's not chemistry. That's hormonal imbalance. Sign number 5, deep fatigue that lingers. Not just tired, but bone-deep fatigue. The kind that doesn't go away with a nap. The kind that sticks around the next day or 2. So what's going on beneath all this? Let's talk hormones. Every time you have sex, especially ejaculation, your body taps into the HPG axis. That's the hypothalamus, pituitary, gonadal system. It controls testosterone, fertility, libido, and mood. In men over 60, this axis is already more sensitive. And when you overuse it too often without enough recovery, it gets out of rhythm. Your testosterone doesn't just dip. It can stay low for days, sometimes longer. And when testosterone stays low, you get mood swings, low energy, sleep disruption, anxiety, brain fog, reduced desire. In other words, you lose the very things you're trying to protect. When sex leaves you more exhausted than fulfilled, you don't need to stop. You just need to change the way you do it. Let me give you another example. Paul was 64. He loved his wife, still attracted to her. But he came to me saying, "Doc, I feel like I'm dying slowly every time I try to keep up with her." He wasn't joking. He was pale, sleep-deprived, emotionally distant, and borderline depressed. Not because he didn't want to be intimate, but because he was overriding every signal his body gave him. He thought saying no meant he was failing as a husband. But here's the irony. Once we gave his body time to rest, and gave him permission to talk to his wife honestly, the intimacy got better. Less frequent, but deeper. More affectionate. More connected. He told me 6 weeks later, "I'm not doing it more, but I'm loving it more." That's the shift. Now let's talk long term. If you ignore these signs for too long, here's what I've seen happen. Testosterone crashes become permanent. Anxiety turns into clinical depression. ED becomes chronic. And intimacy, instead of being joyful, becomes feared. That's why early intervention matters. So when should you see a doctor? Here's my advice. If you consistently feel drained for more than 24 to 48 hours after sex, if your erections become weaker or unpredictable, if you experience rapid mood changes after intimacy, if your sleep is disrupted more than 2 to 3 nights a week, or if your desire drops suddenly and doesn't return, then it's time for a full workup. I usually start with total and free testosterone, LH and FSH levels, cortisol morning, sleep quality screening, blood pressure and resting heart rate, depression and anxiety scales. Because the truth is, sex isn't just about one part of your body. It reflects your entire system. You can't heal what you refuse to look at. But once you start listening, your body will show you the way. So if you're wondering whether you're pushing too hard, you probably are. But that's not a problem. That's an opportunity to pause, to rest, to rebuild, not stop. Because intimacy after 60 isn't about proving you can. It's about choosing to do it right. With care, with timing, with rhythm, with respect for your body's pace. And if you do that, you won't need more. You'll simply enjoy better. Is there a safe number? What I tell my patients. This is the question I hear more than almost any other. "Doc, just tell me, how often should a man over 60 have sex?" And my answer is always the same. It depends, not on your age, but on your health and your recovery. There's no magic number, no universal rule, but there are patterns, guidelines, rhythms that tend to work for different types of people. If you're in good health, you sleep well, eat decently, move daily, and have no major chronic issues, then 1 to 2 times per week is usually a safe, sustainable range. If you have chronic conditions, like diabetes, heart disease, sleep apnea, or hormonal imbalances, then 2 to 4 times per month is often better. Not because you're weak, but because your body needs more time to recharge. I always ask men to treat sex the same way they treat aerobic exercise. Would you run wind sprints every day at 65? Probably not. Would you lift weights 7 days a week with no rest? Definitely not. So why treat sex differently? You warm up, you stretch, you fuel your body, you rest after, you track how you feel. Intimacy is no different. It's a cardiovascular event. It's a hormonal event. It's an emotional event. So it deserves the same respect, the same balance, the same recovery. One of the biggest mistakes I see men make is trying to match what they see in movies, magazines, or locker rooms. They hear, "Twice a week is normal," and they try to force it, even if it doesn't feel right. They push through exhaustion. They push through disconnection. They ignore their own signals. And that's when things start to break. I give my patients 3 questions to ask themselves after every intimate experience. Do you feel stronger or wiped out? Did you sleep better or worse that night? Do you feel closer to your partner or more distant afterward? If the answers are mostly positive, you're probably in your safe zone. But if you're left feeling depleted, anxious, or emotionally flat, it might be time to slow down. You don't need more sex. You need more closeness. Let me share a story. George was 67, recently retired. Still walked every day, played golf, cooked dinner. He told me, "We're having sex twice a week, but I feel disconnected." At first, he thought it was low testosterone. But after a few conversations, he realized the real issue was emotional distance. His wife felt rushed. He felt pressured. They were going through the motions, not actually connecting. So I suggested they try something different. Not more sex, more time together. They started taking slow walks without their phones. They held hands. They sat down for breakfast and just talked. A month later, George told me, "We're having sex once a week now, but it feels like we're 20 again." Because frequency never mattered as much as presence. Another patient, Thomas, was 64 and divorced. He lived alone but had a partner he visited on weekends. He felt guilty because he couldn't perform 2 days in a row. "I feel like I'm failing her," he said. We ran his laps. He was healthy, but exhausted. He worked full-time, barely slept, and hadn't taken a vacation in years. I told him, "It's not your manhood that's tired. It's your nervous system." He didn't need pills. He needed permission to rest. And once he gave himself that grace, his weekends became less stressful and more meaningful. There's no one-size-fits-all, but there is a rhythm that works for you. And it can change, week to week, season to season, health to health. So don't get stuck in some rigid idea. Be flexible. Be curious. Be honest with yourself and your partner. If you're forcing it just to hit a number, you're missing the point. Sex is not a metric. It's not a scoreboard. It's a conversation between your body, your heart, and your connection. So if you're wondering, what's my number? Try this. Start with once a week. Track how you feel for 48 hours after. Adjust up or down based on mood, sleep, and emotional connection. Then check again in a month. Then in 6 months. Because your body will always tell you the truth, if you're willing to listen. And if you're ever in doubt, ask your doctor, ask your partner, and most importantly, ask yourself. Because the real answer isn't in statistics, it's in how you feel. You don't need to do more. You need to do what matters, with presence, with rhythm, with care. When you do that, you stop chasing numbers and start living connected. That's the real secret to healthy sex after 60. And it's not about how much. It's about how meaningful. What really matters, intimacy versus performance. Let me be blunt. Sex after 60 is not about performance. It's about presence. It's not about proving anything. It's about feeling something. And yet, so many men still feel like they're on stage every time they're in bed. They measure their worth by how long they last, how hard they get, how many times they can do it in a weekend. But none of that makes you a better lover. In fact, the men who focus the most on performance often feel the least satisfied afterward, because they're missing the point. Real intimacy has nothing to do with performance. It has everything to do with connection. And the truth is, men who feel emotionally close to their partners, who feel seen, heard, and loved, tend to have better erections, more stable hormones, and more fulfilling sex. That's not just opinion. That's physiology. When you're relaxed, your nervous system shifts from fight or flight to rest and digest. Blood flows better. Hormones release naturally. Testosterone functions properly. But if you're anxious, ashamed, or afraid of disappointing your partner, your brain sends stress signals to your body. And that's the fastest way to lose an erection. So if you're wondering why things don't work like they used to, it may not be your body. It may be your emotions. I've seen this too many times to count. Men come in thinking they have ED, when really they have a communication problem. They haven't talked to their partner in months. They're hiding how tired they feel. They're ashamed of the changes in their body. And that silence, it turns into pressure. And pressure kills intimacy. So what do I tell them? Start with honesty. Tell your partner what's going on. Tell her what you're afraid of. Tell her what you still desire and what's changed. You might be surprised, because I've seen countless women respond with relief. They're not disappointed. They're just confused. And once the confusion is gone, the pressure is too. I tell my patients, intimacy doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the kitchen, in the car, on the couch. It starts with the way you listen, the way you reach out, the way you hold her hand for no reason. Because physical connection grows from emotional safety. And if you build that, the rest will follow. One patient of mine, Ben, was 70. He hadn't had sex in over a year. Not because he didn't want to, but because every time he tried, he couldn't perform. He felt embarrassed. He avoided his wife. They stopped even hugging. He came in eyes down and said, "I think I'm broken." He wasn't. I asked him one question. When was the last time you told your wife how you feel? He couldn't remember. So we practiced. Not sex, not pills, but conversation. 3 weeks later he came back smiling. "We didn't have sex," he said, "but she hugged me for 10 minutes, and I felt more alive than I have in a year." He wasn't broken. He was just alone. And now he wasn't. Another couple, Alan and Marie, had been married for 40 years. They hadn't been intimate in nearly 2. They said life just got in the way. When they came in, they sat 3 feet apart. They looked like strangers. But the moment Alan turned and said, "I miss you," something shifted. Marie reached for his hand, and they both cried. 2 months later, they weren't just having sex again. They were dating each other. It wasn't magic. It was connection. Sometimes a long hug makes your heart race more than a quick night of sex. That's what really matters. So if you're worried about your performance, shift your focus. From hardness to honesty. From lasting longer to loving deeper. From doing more to being closer. Because in the end, that's what your partner remembers. That's what your heart remembers. And that's what will keep you both going far beyond 60. Stop performing. Start connecting. Closing message: sex isn't a number, it's a language. If there's one message I want to leave you with today, it's this. Sex isn't a number. It's not a weekly quota. It's not a measure of your masculinity. It's a language. A language your body speaks. A language your partner hears. And like any language, it needs practice, patience, and presence. I've seen too many men try to speak it by force. They count days. They chase pills. They push their bodies until it stops listening. But what if I told you, your body was never the problem? What if you just stopped talking at yourself and started listening to yourself? One man told me, "I thought I was broken because I couldn't do it 3 times a week like before. But I never asked myself if I even needed to." That's what hit me. Most of the time, men over 60 aren't chasing sex. They're chasing connection. They're chasing touch. They're chasing something that makes them feel alive again. But they've been told that only doing it counts. So let me say this clearly. Intimacy is more than intercourse. It's the smile across the dinner table. The quiet hand on the back as you pass in the hallway. The way you listen when she's had a hard day. Those are intimate acts. And sometimes they mean more than any night in bed. I'm not saying sex doesn't matter. It does. But the way we define it, the way we pressure ourselves to perform instead of connect, that's what needs to change. So instead of asking, "How often should I have sex?" maybe ask this: "How often do I feel truly close to the person I love?" If that answer feels low, then forget the numbers and start rebuilding the bridge. step by step, touch by touch, word by word, because at this stage of life, sex isn't about the fire. It's about the warmth that remains after. And that warmth comes from understanding, compassion, honesty, and patience. So don't measure your manhood by the number of times per week. Measure it by the number of moments you make her feel seen, heard, held. That's the man who ages with dignity and loves with strength. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about how this topic made you feel. And subscribe if you want more conversations that matter. Because no matter your age, your intimacy still matters. And so do you.